Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first quick collabs that we are hosting. We thought we would start by everybody could share their name and where they are and what they're drinking if they have a drink, because I'm Hannah. It is 6 a.m. and I'm drinking a cup of tea.
I'm Caitlin and I'm in Australia. So I've got a cup of, well, it was chamomile, but I've finished it.
I'm Eloise and I'm drinking a smoothie that my son just made, and it is 2 p.m. here in Maputo, Mozambique.
My name is Charlie. I'm also in Southern Africa and I wish I had a coffee.
No children to bring you a coffee. Unbelievable.
Well, I mean, they could. They choose not to.
Oh. So this is our first quick collab, and the whole idea of this is for anyone who shows up to have a conversation about anything. And we want to build a community, and the idea is that this is a safe space to share ideas. You don't have to use names or schools or anything like that. The whole idea is just to have an open discussion and maybe learn a few things from each other, if that sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah. And we're going to keep them super short, around 20 minutes. Yeah.
We'll go from there. So we're going to start. I'm going to pose a question for Eloise. So this quick collab is all about student engagement. So Eloise, what comes to mind with you when you think about student engagement?
You know, I was thinking, so I work in primary school, and I was thinking when you walk through primary school, no matter the class you go in, the kids are always super excited, right? They're excited about anything that the teacher presents them. And I was thinking, why is that our young learners get so curious about things, they ask things, they go home, they talk about their learning, but then the older they get, I feel like that excitement sometimes vanishes away. And I wonder why that is, because for me, student engagement is like seeing that curiosity, kids going home and talking about it, bringing things to school, like in primary school, like show and tell is a big thing. And I think all that shows student engagement. You bring something from home, you share your learning with others, and you get excited about it. So I really wonder, like, what happens over the course of the years that this excitement sometimes goes away. So yeah, I wonder. So I'm excited to talk to everybody about it today.
Yeah, I remember I worked with a lady who she was a senior school teacher, and then she came down to primary school. And like the biggest thing that she talked about, she was like, the kids love you no matter what. They just love you. And she was like, you do not get that in second grade.
Yeah, I teach in the upper school. I teach high school and middle school students. And I remember during my teacher training, one of my kind of professors had told me, like, in like 7th and 8th grade, like you could be like the Pied Piper square. So I think there is this idea that they're still like up for anything, but that kind of dissipates kind of pretty soon after that. And I think part of it is like there has to be like a culture of it at your school. Like you can't be in high school or middle school the one teacher who is engaging. Like there has to be like a like something that everyone shares, so that as they're moving between classes and between teachers, which is a lot more common, in the upper, in high school, like there has to be a thread that connects it. Otherwise, you're really kind of paddling against the current sometimes.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting about the classroom culture. Yeah. I was reading an article the other day from I think it was from the University of New South Wales, and it was about like other factors that affect engagement as kids grow. And so they were saying like there's kind of like a
correlation.
Thank you. English is a second language. That's just jumped in for me. But yeah, there's a correlation between hitting puberty and having all those hormones, and also kind of reaching that age where you're trying to find your independence and your identity from adults. And it's, about that time that you're hitting middle school as well. And so high school teachers are kind of battling against those big changes, and they were looking at like that kind of key areas where teachers can make a big difference with students. And they looked at like how teachers' support comes into it. So like how they emotionally support their students. I think how they keep high expectations of their students, and then have like supportive boundaries for students as well. Yeah, and they found that, like, even though at that age they're kind of pushing adults away, they found like having that nurturing environment still with the teachers made a huge difference.
See, I find that so interesting, right? This what's her name? Rita Pierce. I think, you know, this teacher on TED Talk who talked about, like, she talked a little bit about the relationship between teachers and students. And she once said, like, students don't learn from someone they don't like. And Charlie, when you talked about like teacher engagement and student engagement and how it's like, you need to develop that culture. I find sometimes, you know, like, think of my own kids, they talk about teachers they like because the teachers are cool, or they make a joke, or, you know, so they feel like personally connected, and then like, yeah, I like their subjects. But then I sometimes wonder, is it about the subject, or is it about that relationship they built with the teacher? And then they're like, that's a cool guy, or it's a cool woman, and I just want to learn from them. So I think that personal connection is really important.
It's hard also because, like, you have so much more responsibility as you get older of like the content that you learn, right? So like if I'm teaching year 3, I can have dragons and they're spitting fireballs, and then, you know, when you're teaching a 16-year-old, that's not going to really get them engaged. So it's hard to like where that balance is, and big kids scare me.
I think to Charlie's point as well, like, swimming against the tide in secondary, it's much easier in primary when you have the kids for the majority of the week as well, because you become this little team, and, you know, you develop those close relationships and bonds, whereas in secondary you get so much less time with the kids that it makes it a lot harder.
Yeah. Hi, Alina, I'm very sorry if I haven't said your name correctly. Welcome. You can jump in if you ever want to. We're just having a chat about student engagement. I was going to say, have you guys seen Adolescence on Netflix? They have an episode where they're just in the senior school, and you feel the stress and you feel the lack of engagement. And obviously, you know, it's a show, but very based on a lot of real life stuff. And like, you can just feel the stress of being in that school. And yeah, it was very good. I recommend it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, Hannah, because I was reading this book, UDL Now, and I just read it this morning a little bit more. And I thought it was interesting because they talk about student engagement and barriers. And they say, like, you know, you can actually put structures in place to kind of like engage students more, right? So it's not just like about you're the cool teacher, but you actually thoughtfully thought about like, what can you put in place to engage students? And I really liked how they talked about like those classroom discussions we sometimes have. You know how you always have the same students who raise their hand, always the same kids. And they talk about like, why don't you think about the barriers and you remove them? For example, she said, you know, put like the vocabulary on the board. So for example, our EAL learners now have the words to express themselves. Or she said, like, you know, put key ideas somewhere in the classroom. So when the discussion starts, maybe you forgot some, but you can look around the environment and then participate. So she talks about putting in those structures to actually you know, promote that engagement. And I thought like, oh, that's actually an interesting idea, because I remember the time when it's always the same kid who raises their hand and you're like, let's give somebody else a chance. But if you don't put the structures in place, how do you do that?
Well, I would wonder, like, what are some of the other structures? Like, I think, like, you know, giving people talk time, that idea of like, I'm going to throw the idea out there and ask nobody to really speak for 10 or 15 seconds. Like, I know that can help. Like, are there, because I mean, I know for me, like, I'm going from like one class to the next, and the idea of putting vocabulary up, I don't know, like, it's hard, quite honestly. Like, it's hard to find the time to do those things if you've got 4 different preps and different concepts. And I wonder what other ones can you do just on the fly, you know, that would help.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of something.
Well, we like in our maths resources, so it's kind of similar to the extra talk time, but we have got it challenges so that the students who kind of do finish earlier and they're the ones that are putting their hands up, they have an extra challenge that they can kind of pick off and go deeper into their learning. And it just allows that time for the other students to be engaged in what the core question was.
And you know, another thing I like to do in parent workshops sometimes, but also with students, is like you give everybody time to write down like 3 main ideas. You maybe pose a question like, what comes to your mind? What do you think comes to your mind when you hear this? And then everybody has to write it down, and then you now share. And because everybody wrote something down, they have this like paper to kind of like engage in the conversation. And I feel like that's sometimes helpful, because otherwise we take a step back and be like, I let the other kids speak. But now that you wrote it down, there's no excuse not to share.
Yeah, and I think thinking routines too, like think, pair, share. That's always a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe those chatty ones, you actually put them in a little group on by themselves, so that they're actually chatting each other out, and then the others are getting a little bit of space, maybe to have their say, allegedly.
See, I wonder, how did we all get ready to participate and engage in this conversation, right? Like maybe you even get mentally ready, like this is going to happen. So I wonder, as teachers, could we be like, hey, just to let you know, tomorrow we're going to talk about those things in case you want to get ready. I think that could also be helpful, kind of a heads up, and not like a surprise,
Yeah, kind of a less informal way of doing flip learning or blended learning. Yeah.
So when any of you think of a teacher in your education that was like really engaging, is there someone that comes to mind? Like, can we find a common thread between us, or what? So let's go to you, Caitlin. Who is a teacher who comes to mind that you were like, this was my engaging teacher?
Yeah, so I had Mr. Cranley in, I actually was lucky I had him for year 6 and year 7, which at the time was both, like year 7 was part of primary school. And I was really thinking about that today, like what made his classes so engaging. And I think it was the relationship he built with us. So we had, every morning we'd go out and do like 15, 20 minutes of like sports or exercises with him. And he wouldn't just tell us what to do. He would play with us. He'd do the exercises. And I think that like just built like a fun bond with him. But yeah, it was just his relationship. He would joke with us, but he still had like firm but fair boundaries, never lost his cool. And he connected heaps of stuff to real life. Like he had his own stories about his life he'd bring into it, or he'd like connect it to us. And even like this was in the 90s, so we'd go to his house for our class parties, which you probably wouldn't do now.
Maybe that's the one thing. That's not
But I mean, that was just like, it was like the end of year class party, and it was just how he saw us. Like we'd go there and hang out with his kids, and we'd run around the yard and swim in the pool. And yeah, it was just like such a, like, you just thought he was so cool that anything he did in class, you like eat it up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Charlie, do you have someone who stands out?
Yeah, as far as, yeah. So, and it's interesting, right? Like you mentioned, your teacher that never lost his cool. The teacher I'm thinking of actually always lost his cool, but he was at the same time, like, I think people overuse this idea, especially on resumes, of like, I'm a passionate teacher or passionate educator. Like, I think it's so overused, but like this guy, he really deeply cared. And he taught like, so this is like 9th grade, 10th grade civics and history. And he just really cared. Like he cared, about government and like what our country was doing and how it helped people or how it hurt people. And I mean, part of what I remember about him was him flying off the handle sometimes, because teacher, when students, were misbehaving or whatever. And this was in the 80s, right? So even just more of the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
More things happening, like, but like he cared about it, like, and he wanted to make sure that people understood like their role in the civic process and, what governments were doing in their name. And yeah, like he would have been, disciplined many times over in today's environment. And I get that, but he also like really cared about what he taught about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Sorry, you go.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as an adult now, you realize how important government and all of that is, but at the time when you're a kid, you're like, why do I need to know this? It's so hard to do.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was thinking about like my biology teacher in high school. Her name was Frau Dietrich. So Miss Dietrich, she was in the German school, and she was very strict. I think we all thought she was 100 years old. She always had this kind of gray suit on and gray stockings, and her hair was all gray and put up, and she was extremely strict. But I loved her, and everybody in class loved her. And I was thinking, why? Because she really was a little bit scary, but I adored her, and she was like my role model. I was like, I wanted to study biology because of her, and because she had such high expectations, but also super clear guidance. She would always be like, I know you guys can do it. It may be challenging, but you guys can do it, and I'm going to be here to help you. So I feel like we always felt like really challenged in a really meaningful way, and we felt like we all grew and learned, and with this kind of like balance of like, I know she deeply cared about us, but she wasn't warm and fuzzy. But when we did something well, she was really complimenting our hard work and us as learners. And so I like this idea of like clear expectation, but also believing like we could do more and raising the bar high. And that's where we got the engagement, I think.
Yeah, I think high expectations are so important, like for children. Like if you have really high expectations, kids really respond to it as well. Yeah.
And I think consistency, isn't it? Like those expectations are consistent throughout whatever you're doing. So my engaging teacher was Miss Gilmore. She was my year 3 and year 4 teacher, and she was just amazing. Like we were building, I remember building stilts, and like we had to have nails and hammering, and like we built these stilts that you would walk on. We made pasta, and I was so enthusiastic. She let me take home the pasta maker that night because I was so into, like, she was just someone who, she was like, how can we do this? And how can we sprinkle super duper fun on top of it? And she was just, like, I still read to my kids Sideways Stories from Wayside School. She read that to me. And like, it was she read it in such a fun, it's a little bit of an outdated book now, but she was just so enthusiastic about how she read it. So like whenever each year I read that to my new students, just because it like ties me back to her. And she still lives in the town where my parents live, but my mum occasionally sees her and she's like, Hannah, she still reads your book, and she gets very emotional whenever. So shout out to Miss Gilmore. She was amazing.
Hannah, and I think what you just said, this idea of like she was so enthusiastic, and then you put that onto your students, right? I think if you're excited about your lesson, then I think it's hard for students not to get excited too.
Yeah, I agree. So that kind of leads us to our final question, which is, do we have any top tips that we use or have heard or have seen? Does anyone have any top tips that they want to share about how to increase student engagement? Anyone can have the floor.
You know, I was reading, as I said, the UDL Now by Katie Novak, and she talked about choices, right? Because we always think like, if we have a saying in what we want to learn, of course we're more engaged because we pick what maybe speaks to us or where we are right now in our journey. But she brought up something really interesting. She talked about the amount of choices. So I know like in our school, everybody loves choice sports, right? They're like, that's a great way to kind of like remove barriers of learning. It's a great way to differentiate. And then you get those pages filled with choices. But Katie Novak actually talked about the choice paralysis. That's a word I never actually came across. And she says, if you give too many choices, then you actually get the opposite. You don't get engagement, but you get like overwhelmed. And she talked about some research that was out there. And she said, more than 6 choices is too much, and then has the opposite effect. So for me, that was like an aha moment. Like when you create choice boards, think carefully about like not going above 6 choices, and then those 6 choices, be really mindful of like how you can create them so they tackle different kind of learners and levels and ways they want to express themselves. So I thought that was interesting.
It is cool. Yeah, I'm definitely someone that if you gave me more than 6 choices, because I overthink everything, I would spend ages just trying to pick the right choice.
That's like picking something to watch on television these days, and it's just like I'll spend half an hour and then come back to like the second thing I saw, but I need to see all the options. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is like strictly engagement, but it has something to do with like focus, I guess, which I think, we a lot of times have the choice if we're going to do something like, analog on pen and paper or digitally. Like you can create, whether it's a Venn diagram or, anything else, right? And I do think like when kids are doing it online, they're spending as much time kind of working out the technology as they are really the ideas you want them to engage with. And so like, even if they would maybe choose, to do things, with a program or an app or something, like just giving them pencil and paper or sometimes to do it, they actually will end up doing more and being kind of more engaged in the moment.
Yeah, so that's kind of like channeling their focus so that their engagement is kind of in the objective where you want it to be. Yeah.
That's true.
And I think anything where you can, not necessarily like you can't make everything a game, but bring in like chance or jeopardy immediately kind of increases a little bit of engagement, whether it's just as simple as like to make a number sentence, you're flipping over cards, or just anything where you can kind of like keep that tiny bit of curiosity in some way. And I think like that's what I think about is like, how can I bring chance or jeopardy into this to where it's just like, oh no, or yes, I got that. And
yeah, there's nothing better than hearing that in a classroom, like kids doing maths and they're like, yeah, oh, like you can feel the fun in the room. Yeah. I'd agree, like anything that sparks a little bit of intrigue as well. So problem solving, or even like using a code cracker or something like that, bringing a little bit, again, element of chance or something they have to work out and problem solve is really engaging as well.
And I was even thinking like when you talk about the game or like this idea of like, somehow I'm going to be kept held accountable. Like, I'm going to get feedback on it, or somebody's going to look at it, or it is a competition. But I think this idea of like, I'm not just doing it to get it done, but actually somebody is going to look at it and I'm going to talk about it. I think this kind of feedback also makes it more engaging, right? Like, because you're like, oh, now I'm sharing it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes collaboration as a game over competition is sometimes underestimated and undervalued. And like, if you can make it collaborative, sometimes you get a really good discussion and things like that.
Yeah, even if it's not a game, like a research project, when you can collaborate and share ideas and discuss is far more engaging. And you have you're learning soft skills and you're, discussing and processing what you're learning as well.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to do a game or do we want to share that next time?
I think we should stick to our like quick snap time frame.
Quick snappy. Okay. We were quick and snappy. Snappy and quick. Well, thank you very much, Charlie, for joining us as our first ever special guest. Greatly appreciated. And thanks for sharing your ideas. And does anyone have any final notes that they want to share?
It's a great Sunday afternoon.
I'll say
great discussion.
My dogs very much enjoyed the discussion.
Is he like wrestling or is that medical? Is that therapeutic or just he likes it?
It's decoration. No, it's not. She's been itching herself really badly. So she's got instead of the cone of shame, she's got the travel pillow of shame.
All right.
So
thank you, ladies.
Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.